Breaking news here. In two separate bombshell rulings this afternoon, judges have ruled that the Trump administration must issue SNAP payments during the government shutdown by tapping the contingency fund that Republicans have been promising, insisting that they don't have the power to use. According to the New York Times, in one of the cases, Judge John McConnell of the U.S. District Court for the District of Rhode Island ordered on Friday that the Trump administration must distribute the contingency money timely or as soon as possible for the November 1st payments to be made. His order came shortly after another federal court in Massachusetts handed an early victory to about 24 states, which similarly had sued to force the release of food stamps funding. In that case, Judge Indira Talwani of the U.S. District Court for the District of Massachusetts found that the decision to halt SNAP benefits was unlawful. She required the administration to explain by Monday how it could fund aid in November. Quote, "Congress has put money in an emergency fund. It's hard for me to understand how this isn't an emergency when there's no money and a lot of people are needing their SNAP benefits." The ruling is a major rebuke to the Trump administration and the Republican Party that has been hoping to exploit the issue of 42 million hungry Americans to force the government to open without ACA subsidy extensions. In other words, they tried to use hungry people to extort sick people, because what else would you expect from Donald Trump, whose favorite book is famously the Bible, and Mike Johnson, who views himself as a vehicle for Jesus himself to speak to the masses? Up to now, Mike Johnson and Republicans have been swearing up and down that the contingency fund for SNAP wasn't able to be tapped because then we wouldn't have it for an emergency, which doesn't exactly make sense, because if SNAP benefits wouldn't go out and 42 million people would be at risk of not getting food, does that not constitute an emergency? What other kind of emergency would necessitate the contingency fund aside from people simply not getting food? Here's Mike Johnson testing out that lie just hours before the ruling proving him wrong came out.
I'll just add to that. The Democrats are lying about that, and I think they know that. Some of the ones who are out saying it are actually attorneys. They can read the black letter law themselves. They've even filed a lawsuit, you saw, to try to do it. Why? Because they wanted a talking point. They know that's a frivolous piece of litigation. They know they're going to lose, but they also know it'll take many weeks or months to have that ultimately determined by a court because of the way the justice system works. So they're using it as a talking point to try to claim. I believe they know for a fact that what they filed in the court is false. You know, they're lawmakers. They're supposed to know how the law works. And so the whole thing is just shameful. And they're using the people as pawns in this game. That underlying fund that the Secretary just addressed was unfunded by the Democrats themselves when they voted against the CR.
Think about how sick that is. Mike Johnson called the lawsuit to release the SNAP funds frivolous. Why? Because he didn't want it to succeed. He wanted people to go hungry because it was a bargaining chip for him and Republicans. He tried to undermine a case that was ultimately successful, ultimately succeeded at ensuring that 42 million Americans get food. And this is the "what would Jesus do" guy? And look, of course, the notion that the fund couldn't be tapped was also completely baseless. This is a contingency fund that the Trump administration itself used in 2019. Here's a headline from Fox News, of all places, proving exactly that point. So when the Trump administration and House Republicans claim that the funds are somehow not available to them, they are lying because they want to make everyone think that there is no choice here and that the government must be reopened to keep those SNAP benefits coming. Again, that's a lie. In fact, according to the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities, the administration's assertion that it cannot use the SNAP's contingency reserves to cover regular SNAP benefits is contrary to the plain text of the law, prior Trump administration practice, including as recently as a few weeks ago in the Agriculture Department's lapse of funding plan, which the agency has since removed from its website, the first administration's understanding, as communicated repeatedly in multiple USDA documents and confirmed by the Government Accountability Office, that contingency funds could be used for SNAP benefits during the 2018-2019 shutdown, and previous administration's understanding that contingency funds could be used for SNAP benefits during a shutdown. But again, despite all those facts laid out in that previous document, and despite what the judge had ruled today, the point was that Republicans did not want contingency funds to be tapped because they wanted to be able to exploit people's hunger to get the government back open without a deal on health care. They tried to pit the sick against the hungry to achieve their political goals. And that's a point that I made on News Nation. They could end this right now. They are choosing to make this issue of the shutdown an issue where they pit the sick against the hungry. The reality is this is a false choice. We don't need to be here. Prior to this moment, we've been able to afford both the ACA subsidies and SNAP benefits for 42 million Americans. So you have to ask yourself, why are we here? And the reality is that the Republicans passed their one big beautiful bill. They cut $1 trillion from healthcare. That included 17 million people worth of Medicaid benefits. And they also cut $350 billion worth of SNAP benefits. So if you're wondering how we got here, it's because we're dealing with a Republican Party that has full control of government, House, Senate, White House, and their priority is not to continue these programs. It is expressly to cut them. That's why they did it. Don't listen to what they say, just watch what they do. In other words, they were playing make-believe here that the only way to continue food assistance to 42 million Americans was to open the government and to do so without relenting on ACA subsidies. Again, they were creating a false choice here that it's either food or healthcare. The reality is that they don't care about either program because they don't think the government should be involved in the business of healthcare or feeding people. That is the fundamental difference between the Democrats and the Republicans. Democrats believe that the government should provide for a basic minimum standard of living. Republicans believe that the government should exist to heap benefits onto the rich so that they can trickle down onto the poor in a continuation of a 45-year-long failed experiment. And so that is why they have no qualms about putting both food assistance and healthcare on the chopping block. At the end of the day, they want out of the business of both. And they know that if they can exploit the pain that people are about to feel, that they can use that for the government to be reopened without a deal on healthcare, where there will be zero pressure then to negotiate ACA subsidies in the future. The Republicans know that they just need to get over this hump and that they'll be one big step closer to hobbling the ACA for good. And they're using hungry people as a way to get there. So for everybody watching, look, pour one out for Mike Johnson, a major loss that he can no longer use 42 million hungry Americans as a bargaining chip to force the destruction of our healthcare system. But hey, maybe he'll have more luck dangling the prospect of cutting child cancer research or Social Security as a chip to get healthcare out in the future. Something to think about the next time any of these ghouls tell you that they give half a shit about working people.